Hi everybody, welcome back. It's day 63 on our journey from $0 to $1 million startup. This week I met with the casting director for working on the videos that we're going to be producing for the site, sample of intro videos basically. I broke ground on coding, so wrote the very first meaningful line of code this week, and I ran into my first development challenge. So all that and more in just a sec. I met with the casting director this weekend to talk through how we want to make these videos, these sample intro videos for the site. I really want people to feel like they can make these videos. I think they need to see somebody who appears authentic, but also looks professional so that they get the idea, the story behind the concept. To think about how to be the most authentic we can be, I wanted to choose people from tech startups because that's what I know. It's also the niche that I'm going to be targeting in the beginning, again, because it's something I'm really familiar with. So I know these roles, I know the kinds of people who are there, I know the buying decisions and stuff like that happens. I want the videos to reflect that. The other nice thing about these roles is they're very common, so I think you can extrapolate. If you don't exactly match one of these, you can still probably get the idea. So this is what I made for her. I basically came up with 4 different personas. I've got a product designer, a sales dev representative, a founder and a CEO, and a marketing VP. I've given kind of like a background for these people and then a sample script that kind of just shows the kinds of jargon and the explanation of the roles so that our casting director can make smart decisions about who to cast and also, how to run with it. But we also don't want this to feel really scripted, so this is just a starting point. It's just something that they can riff off of. A couple of weeks ago, I took a field trip with my son's first grade class to the zoo. This week, I was able to go with my third grade son's class to the Indiana State House in Indianapolis here. So that was a great, fun thing to do, and I took an extended lunch with some friends, so kind of lost some of that work time, but then I made it up in the evening, kind of after everyone goes to bed. I stayed up for a little while and kept progress going. I guess I'm just saying that because I love the flexibility of starting a startup, and doing your own thing. Sometimes you just need to shift your day around. You take advantage of opportunities that come your way. Being able to kind of work late, maybe not get as much sleep one night, sometimes is really worth it for that flexibility. So breaking ground on the coding, very excited. So the very first step for me is taking these Figma designs that I've come up with and putting them into real HTML, CSS code that people can actually interact with. So a great thing to start with is like text box and buttons. So I have all these button variants. We got different sizes. We got hover states. We got disabled states. So I've created a path on the site /design where I can work with these things and start trying to get them to match pixel for pixel, what I've got in my design. And to help me do that, I put a bunch of different variants of these components, and what I'll do is take a screenshot of something, and then I'll drop it into Figma, and I'll take the corresponding component that I'm trying to mimic, and I'll make a copy of it, and then I'll just kind of see if we can get these things to be exactly lined up. So what I like to do is put this on top, and then give it a opacity. And then you'll see them starting to line up, and then I gotta get this kind of exactly where it would be. And you can see we're pretty damn close. And in the actual code, it kind of looks like this. It's just, I got a template file here. We got various different ways you can tweak these buttons. And then we've got a lot of conditional logic, around how they're rendered. And that way, whenever we do want to actually use a button, it'll look just something like this, where you can basically just say, the kind of button that you want to render. So it's a lot of work to get these right, but there's things like activation, states and focus states. And when you nail that, then the rest of the app, you never really have to worry about it again. So it's a great place to start. As a reminder, we're using Stimulus and Turbo for the front-end framework here for the app, and Tailwind. So in the past, I've used Angular. Those kinds of frameworks they're really heavy. The farther along I've got, the more I realize just like how much work you're just dealing with the concepts of these frameworks. I love Stimulus and Turbo for being very, very simple. So our front end is going to be hosted on a static website, which means there's no web server behind it. It's just going to be HTML. So we won't have access to dynamic data. Everything we do, we're going to be loading from the servers. This is just kind of a quick walkthrough of how this is going to work. So got this layout for the app. In the main area of it, we're going to have these turbo frames of the actual page the person's loading. In the main dashboard page, it's going to look like this. We basically give it an initial view to load, and that sets up the whole page, and then it's going to call this back-end operation. We've got kind of a fake timeout here to see what things look like when they're not super, super fast, to make sure the loading works and everything like that. And we're going to load this component, which goes here. And it's really just a header and a test form, which is right here. And this is just a simple form submission with some text boxes so I can kind of manipulate things. But just wanted to give you a sense of, how this is organized. Turbo is organized into frames for the most part, and that's a main piece of the framework is you can basically take chunks of the page and section them off so that you can work within those sections and load only those sections or target other sections of the app. It's really efficient, and you can do really great things like eager loading. So you can have a frame that's going to load all your messages, and maybe in the beginning you've got a loading message, and then it's going to automatically fetch this and fill that section with your messages. And from what I understand, Turbo was mainly written from the standpoint of Rails, which is a back-end framework. But I'm not using Rails, I'm using Node. Sometimes you run into problems where, a framework was designed with something in mind, and then you kind of use it slightly differently, and some things happen. So I had this crazy head-scratcher of a problem, which really drove me nuts, where I had a very simple set of circumstances where you have you've got a frame and you go somewhere with it and then you come back and it didn't reload itself properly, and it was just driving me crazy. I'm very frustrated right now. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about how even seasoned developers, you always run into things that you're just so frustrated by, and you have no understanding for what's going on, and eventually you need to reach out to the community. So I set up this issue, like a copy of this issue in its smallest form on Replit, and just to show what it looks like. Sometimes when you just form your question, a lot of times you'll answer it for yourself. Just the act of forming it for other people to consume forces you to simplify and really think it through. That didn't happen in this case, but I did get some feedback from somebody else that they kind of agreed with me. This looks like a framework bug. That made me feel like I was not losing my mind, and I opened an issue on the Turbo site with kind of everything I could give people to help work on that issue. Luckily, I found my way through that, but that's just a good example of how in development, you can be barreling along at 100 miles an hour and you can run into a pebble on the road and completely crash your car and have to stop for just, days and days potentially. So what did I actually get done this week on the coding front? The very first thing I like to do when I'm building an app is to get all the flows mapped out and the connection between the different parts of the app to be really fluid. How are you going to get in and out of the app? How are you going to log in? How are you going to log out? How is the authentication going to work to make sure it knows that you're allowed to see a page or you're not allowed to see a page? How do you show panels and modals? How does the URL navigation work? Can you use the back button or not? Can we provide feedback when pages are loading or components are loading? How does the sidebar work, and does it interact with the rest of the app? How does all these things come together? Here's what I've got so far. So we got a login page. We got a forgot password. We've got to create an account. This is the pilot program at this point. So we're going to have an access code required for anybody who wants to sign up, so that we can kind of gate this until we're ready to show everybody what we've got. So we've got some stuff here like validation. So I wanted to make sure I knew how to send notifications to the site and let users know what happened. I wanted to make sure that whenever you have a form, you can change, you can change the body of the form in reaction to that submission. And then when we log in, I wanted to make sure that that flow works out really well too. So we've got the sidebar all mapped out according to the design. We've got each different page loading here, showing a little loader, and we can, when we refresh the page, we get a nice page loading indicator. And I built this sample form to see what happens with being able to target different parts of the site. So I can change the badge, or I can put an alert here like 2 new teammates or something like that. I can also show modals. So this submit button kind of does a lot of things. I'll close this for a second, but just to show you, I can target the different parts of the app through just those streams, those turbo streams that I mentioned earlier. And that modal here, I wanted to make sure we were able to animate elements very easily. Animations are really important key for helping people understand what changed in a page action. That's why hover states are really important. It shows you can interact with that. The modal kind of springing out at you shows you that interruption. It's very clear that you're going to do something and then go back to where you were. You got to be able to have multiple modals, because sometimes a modal will need to do a delete confirmation or something like that. You need to be able to cancel these. You need to be able to click on the mask to close them or hit the escape key. So I wanted to code all that up. You need to make decisions about modals, like does this change the URL or does it not? I typically don't like modals to change the URL because I feel like those are not navigationable actions, but some other things are, and the new teammate page is going to open a panel. It's a whole other panel that comes up and it's going to go down because we want full real estate to deal with certain things like adding teammates, where we want to basically block you from the main navigation of the page so that you can focus on a kind of subtask. And then this does deserve a URL change in my opinion, because if you refresh this page, you want to come back exactly into where you were. And we want to make sure the closing and the opening of that works really well. And this was a lot of work to get here, but I've made some serious progress, so I'm really happy with where we're at. And just to kind of show you how easy it is to animate things, we use this animation library called animate.css. It's really great. You can basically copy all of these pre-written animations and just use them through CSS classes. So to animate something in our app, all we need to do is add those tags to the class, and then we have a special controller, a stimulus controller, to do any kind of exit animation. Exit animations are much harder because with frameworks, usually those, when you're changing elements on the page, they pop out and they're gone. You want them to stick around to do an exit animation and then let them go. Turbo's got some great event hooks that you can hook into to kind of pause rendering and let an animation play out and then let it continue. So really happy to nail that, because now anywhere in the app, if we need to do some kind of animation, that whole thing is worked out. And then another piece to that navigation that I was mentioning is it's really important to me that you can use the back button. So I can hit the back button here. I'm using my keyboard to do it. And it knows where to go. It handles things properly. That's really important. People are bookmarking sites. They're using the back and forward button. They want that experience to reflect what they were looking at when they visited that page. So obeying that is super important. Now at this stage, I'm not doing responsive design quite yet. With the pilot, I'm going to cut scope as much as I possibly can, and that's going to include not letting this work for smaller devices. We're going to put that in later. We don't know what kind of changes we're going to need based on the pilot anyway, so it could be wasted work. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much. Please like and subscribe. Next week, we will probably continue this coding momentum that I've got going on right now. I'm just feeling it a lot, so I want to keep moving in that direction, and we'll see where we're at. All right, see you next week.